The death penalty in the immediate post-war years was becoming something of a controversial topic. As we settled into peacetime, many felt hanging as the preferred method of execution was beginning to feel outdated. However, the whole process was now so swift that in jails where the gallows was adjacent to the condemned cell, the prisoner, even if they kicked up a struggle, would often be hanging, to all intents and purposes dead, within 10 to 15 seconds of the executioners entering the cell. Just moments earlier, they would have been sat dressed in their own clothes, waiting for the fateful hour, with the drop fixed and preparation on the scaffold completed, with the prisoner blissfully unaware. Following a temporary suspension of the death penalty in 1948, a Royal Commission was set up to look at the whole execution protocol, including alternative types of punishment like the gas chamber and electric chair. The published report a few years later decided that hanging would remain the preferred method in the UK, with just a few minor adjustments to various procedures. There then followed a number of high-profile controversial cases in the early 1950s, with at least one of those hanged thought to be innocent and another of such low mental age that his conviction was unsafe. There was another temporary suspension in 1956, and this time Parliament came up with the Homicide Act, separating cases into capital and non-capital murder, with only a select few crimes liable for the death penalty. As we saw in a number of previous episodes of Tales from the Hangman's Record, these were usually the murder of a policeman, such as with Marwood and Padola, or in the course of theft like Forsyth and Harris and Pascoe and Whitty. Today's episode looks at another case of capital murder where a jealous killer shot dead his victims. Had he used a knife, a cutthroat razor, axe or administered poison, he would not have been executed, but murder by the gun always carried the death penalty. It was Tuesday, the 7th of April 1959, and 33-year-old physics lecturer Bernard Hugh Walden was partway through teaching his evening class at Rotherham College of Technology in South Yorkshire in the north of England, when one of his pupils reminded him he had promised to show them a past test paper to help them prepare for the forthcoming end-of-term exams. Walden told the class he would be gone for a few minutes and left the room. He never returned. Moments later, shots were heard in the corridor and two young people lay mortally wounded. Police officers were quickly at the scene, under the supervision of the Chief Constable of Rotherham CID, Mr James Cotton. They quickly ascertained that the two victims were 20-year-old Joyce Moran, a typist and clerk at the college, and her boyfriend, 21-year-old Neil Saxton, a student at the college who lived with his parents in Sheffield. Although no one had seen the actual shooting, Walden became the immediate suspect when it was found he had abandoned his class and had since left the college. When it also became known that the lecturer had a crush on the pretty typist, the police released his name as the man they wished to interview in connection with the murder. Amongst the first to the scene was Dr. David Price, the county pathologist. Price found that Joyce, who had celebrated her 21st birthday just a few weeks earlier, had died instantly, while her boyfriend died from his wounds shortly after reaching hospital. Piecing together what had happened, it seemed that Walden had chanced upon the couple as he left the classroom and headed down the corridor to go to his locker to fetch the exam paper. Seeing them laughing together, with Saxton leading through the office window and Joyce sitting at her desk, had sent Walden into a jealous rage. A keen shot and a member of the local gun club, Walden kept a number of guns, and it appeared that after taking a Luger pistol out of his locker, he had returned to the office, blasting Saxton once in the back, before entering and pumping 6 bullets into Joyce. Examination showed that Joyce Moran had been shot as she made for the door, with a further 4 bullets fired into her heart as she lay on the floor. A manhunt was set up, and notices asking police throughout the country to be on the lookout for Walden, who was still believed to be armed and dangerous, were issued, and a description of the killer also issued to the press. Walden was described as being 5 foot 7 inches tall, of thin build, with a distinct limp. He was driving a blue Ford Prefect car with the registration number SET 369. On the following day, the car was found abandoned in Leeds, along with several pistols and ammunition, which was matched by ballistic experts to the cartridges found at the murder scene. Piecing together what had caused the tragedy, it was found that Walden had developed a crush on Joyce shortly after taking lodgings on Fair Lane, Rotherham, same street as the Moran family home. Walden became friendly with Joyce's family and was a frequent visitor to their house, where from time to time he would watch television. He also took Joyce and the family for trips in his motor car and would often give Joyce a lift into work before he moved to new lodgings across the town at Spinneyfield. It seemed that at some stage Walden had asked Joyce to marry him, but she had laughed off the proposal. Two key incidents seemed to have triggered off the murders. One was Joyce's 21st birthday in November 1958. Amongst the guests were both Bernard Walden and Neil Saxton, a student at the college who had, unbeknown to Walden, been courting Joyce for a few months. Discovering that Joyce had a boyfriend was a body blow for the disabled lecturer, who felt that it was his disability that had put Joyce off him. The other incident was at a college dance when she danced with Saxton brazenly in front of Walden, to the extent that he told a colleague in the following week that if she ever made a fool of him again, he would kill her. The hunt for Bernard Walden went on for several weeks and involved officers in most police forces around the country as well as Interpol. The hunt ended in the early hours of the 1st of May. Walden was spotted by PC Alan Hawkins as he slept in a shelter at Forbury Gardens, Reading, Berkshire. Walden had a shotgun nestled against him, and when he asked what he was doing with the gun, Walden told the officer his name and said he was the man wanted for the murder in Rotherham. In the period leading up to his arrest, Walden had travelled extensively across the country, a fugitive in slow motion, as he was described in one press report, as his limp prevented him from hurrying. He told detectives as he was driven back to Rotherham that after leaving his car in Leeds, he had journeyed down to Leicester, where he panicked when he thought he had been recognised by someone he knew and fled to London. He had been in possession of a large sum of money at this point, but as his travels took him to Torquay, Salisbury and to Oxford, where he had studied for his degree several years earlier, this soon diminished. From Oxford he had cycled to Reading, where down to his last 3 pence he was picked up. In his possession was a shotgun which he claimed to have purchased while on the run, intending to rob a shop. Bernard Walden was charged on 2 counts of murder, and there was to be a series of remand hearings before he was arraigned to stand trial for capital murder. Mr Justice Paul presided over Walden's trial at Sheffield Assizes at the end of June 1959. He pleaded not guilty. Mr George Waller QC told the court how 2 young people were found dying after shots were heard while lectures were in progress at the college on the evening of the 7th of April. Neil Saxton, a former student, had been talking to Joyce Moran through the hatch at the office. On the following day, Walden's car was found abandoned in Leeds, and he was subsequently arrested in possession of a shotgun on the 1st of May. Leading for the defence, Mr Henry Scott QC stated that the facts of the case would not be disputed and that the sole issue of the defence was Walden's mental state and the question of diminished responsibility. Scott said that through contracting polio shortly after his mother's death while he was studying at Oxford, Walden had suffered 2 disappointments. The first was that he had lost studies at a vital time and finished with a disappointing 3rd-class degree. And the second was that the disease had withered his leg, a matter which he was deeply and bitterly conscious and rather ashamed. Walden believes he is a victim singled out by fate. He believes he has an absolute right to kill if he wishes, Mr Scott told the court. Both his father, who hadn't seen his son for 10 years, and Dr James Valentine, a psychiatrist at Scaleborough Mental Hospital at Ilkley, gave evidence of abnormalities in his childhood that included sleepwalking and talking to himself. Described by his colleagues at work as a brilliant scholar and fine lecturer, Walden became infatuated with the pretty typist, and through jealousy at her unreciprocated feelings, he committed a brutal double murder. Medical evidence called by the prosecution suggested that Walden was showing no signs of abnormality of the mind, and this was borne out by a statement he made regarding the murders and how he had regretted his actions. Walden told Dr. James Walker, the chief medical officer at Leeds Prison, "I feel dreadful about causing these deaths, doing all that in the space of 3 seconds. If only I had the sense to count to 10, it would have saved all this." Evidence was also introduced in court to show that Walden had a previous conviction for assaulting a 15-year-old boy in 1948, the poker. He was bound over for 12 months for the offence, and such was his shame, he never saw his father again until his arrest over 10 years later. When summing up the case, Mr. Justice Paul asked Dr. Valentine if Walden knew what he was doing was wrong, to which the doctor replied he was. On the 1st of July, the jury of 10 men and 2 women took just 15 minutes to find Bernard Walden guilty as charged. White-faced, he gripped the bars of the dock as sentence of death was passed on him. Walden was taken to Armley Jail in Leeds for execution. His appeal on the grounds that the trial judge had misdirected the jury in attempting to define mental abnormality was heard at the end of July. The issue of diminished responsibility was discussed in further detail before the appeal was quickly dismissed by Mr. Justice Hilbery. An application to appeal to the House of Lords was also declined, and Walden was returned to the death cell. At 9 o'clock on a sunny Friday morning, the 14th of August 1959, Bernard Walden was hanged by Harry Allen and Thomas Cunliffe. Harry Allen, now established as the country's chief hangman, was carrying out his 9th senior execution. For Assistant Cunliffe, it was his 4th and last job. Some years ago, with Cunliffe long passed away, I met his wife and asked her for her recollections of his time as a hangman. She recalled Walden, who he had referred to as the Mad Professor. She was unaware that her husband had been dismissed following his execution and believed that his career had ended following abolition 5 years later. She did, however, unwittingly offer a clue as to why he may have been sacked. The official LPC4 sheet that records the execution details notes that Cunliffe was slow and fumbling disconcertingly, and therefore the governor recorded he did not have the capacity to continue as an assistant. Cunliffe had told his wife that Walden had lost control of his bladder as he went to strap his ankles, and in his words, was pissing himself. This may well have caused the assistant to hesitate slightly, and with speed of the essence, Allen would have been ready and waiting to push the lever as Cunliffe fumbled with the straps. This delay in performing his one main task on the execution morning was enough for his career to be finished. The timing of the murders was one of tragic coincidence. Both the killer and his male victim had recently taken up new jobs. Neil Saxton should not have been in Rotherham on that fateful night, as he was due to go on a training course from work to Henley, but the course was put back a week and his appearance at the college had been as a surprise to Joyce. Likewise, Walden had recently been offered a new post at Barnsley Technical College, but had decided to put off the new position until his class had taken their exams. Of the 35 executions carried out after the passing of the Homicide Act, 10 were for murder by firearms. Walden's crime was rare in that he had used his gun to kill a love rival and the woman who spurned him, and not in the furtherance of theft, as in the majority of those firearms cases. Was justice done in this instance, and did Walden deserve to hang? Use your comments below for your thoughts on this case and also suggestions for further episodes in this series. Check out my website stevefielding.com for details of all my books and for news on some exciting new projects coming up in 2024. Finally, can I ask you to please like and subscribe if you have enjoyed this video. And so until the next time, thank you and goodbye.